Thank you so much for that. Yeah. We have another speaker who will respond to Professor Rubin, and this is Dr. Nzinga Harrison. And can you hear me? I heard something from the crowd. Is that an applause? Okay. Dr. Harrison, MD, that's her website address, nzingaharrisonmd.com. In case you want to look it up, it's a wonderful website with all sorts of advice from our psychiatrists here. Let me give you a formal introduction of Dr. Harrison. She is a psychiatrist in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm sorry, I'm fumbling here, and okay, here it is. She's board certified in psychiatry and addiction medicine, is an expert on the biological, psychological, and social aspects of health. What we are asking for her to do today is to respond to Dr. Rubin's remarks and to address the impact of over a decade of solitary confinement of her brother, Kofi Modibo Ajabu, in the Indiana Department of Corrections facilities. She's also published an article.
First of all, thank you for putting together this symposium, which is amazing. Thank you to each and every one of you who, just by your presence here, has marked yourselves as an advocate and an activist for this cause. So I stand here in two roles. First, as a psychiatrist, like Shalmer told you. I'm a physician. My specialties are psychiatry and addiction medicine. But second, as a sister. My senior year of high school, my brother was arrested for the highly publicized triple murder slaying that happened in Carmel, Indiana. And since 1994, my brother has either been in jail or prison. That was my senior year of high school. He was 21. Now he's 39. This is my dad, so I have to check for reference. He's 39. I went to see him this morning. My father, Moja Ajabu, as we grew up, was, and at the time of the incident, the commander of the local Black Panther militia, I'm sorry. And so it was a highly politicized case that the son of the commander of the Black Panther militia was involved in the triple murder of 3 white kids from Carmel, Indiana. The headlines, of course, villainized my entire family, my brother included. Through my brother's now 20 years of incarceration, he's repeatedly been put in solitary confinement, much as Dr. Rubin noted, not for any specific reason other than political punishment. And I would wager that part of the cruel and unusual punishment of my brother's time in solitary confinement is that it has been intermittent. So imagine if you were thrown in a hole and tortured, and then for 23 hours a day, and then for 1 hour, you get the light of day or fresh air. What does it feel like when you have to go back in? And when you come out for 6 months or 8 months, and my brother is a natural born leader, I mean just natural born leader. And luckily, as a young child, he was in martial arts and meditation. And this is what has kept my brother from being one of those bloody people smearing feces on the wall. Every month I send him $100 in books on martial arts and meditation. And that is what has kept him human in a system that has done its absolute very best to dehumanize him. So 6 to 8 months out, where he can be in general population, find the younger kids and train them in martial arts and discipline, teach them how to walk in the prison system while still being human and standing up for themselves but not getting in trouble, being identified as a leader and flagged as a threat and thrown back in the hole. What is it like when you go back in the hole? I would say that may be part of the most inhumane aspect of it. So, my brother has been in confinement for consistently about the last 3 years on a charge that the state threw out. They charged him with assaulting a correctional officer, threw him in the shoe. We fought to get it to go to court. The prison refused to produce their evidence. What they did produce showed that he was in a part of the prison geographically remote from where the assault happened. It could not have been him. 3 years later, my brother is still in solitary confinement. We have not had a contact visit in 3 years. My 2-year-old niece has never hugged her uncle. My 7-year-old and 9-year-old sons that I took with me to the prison today but were turned away for a visit because I didn't have their birth certificates. My 9-year-old almost started to cry and said, "What do you mean we have to see him on video again? Why can't we touch him?" The cruel and unusual punishment is not just for my brother. Like Dr. Rubin said, it ripples in concentric circles. It's my brother, it's me, it's my children, it's my friends on Facebook that have to go through this pain with me. It's everybody who reads my blog on the ACLU or follows my website. And so I'll step back because as a physician, I'm always interested in presenting the biology that makes us tick as humans. Dr. Rubin opened up and he said that nurturing and connection to other human beings, we are social beings. That it is housed deep in the parts of our brains that are outside of our voluntary control. You have a pathway in your brain that's called the dopamine pathway. It gets the most publicity for being disordered in people who get addicted to drugs. But evolutionarily, the dopamine pathway keeps us alive and keeps our species propagated. And the natural determinants that activate your dopamine pathway are food, water, sex, we need it to keep the species alive, and nurturing. Nurturing. So this morning, and I've been seeing my brother on contact visits for 3 years, and I talk to him on the phone and we exchange, prison emails, and I always leave astounded that he's been able to withstand what he has been able to withstand. Because I'm a psychiatrist, I take care of critically ill people every day, and I see people who have gone through much less insults, not to undermine or underappreciate their experience, and had developed much more severe symptoms. And so I always leave amazed, a little bit sad that I'm walking out and he's not. But today, as I waited for 30 minutes out of a 1-hour visit, which ended up being 25 minutes instead of an hour after we drove 10 hours and left the kids in the car, this is our experience. The screen was actually in the room with other people who were having contact visits. And as I sat there and I saw other people hugging their loved one, tears came in my eyes. And then the tears were replaced with anger. And then the anger was replaced with rage. And then I started looking at those correctional officers who have been so nice. They were nice people, but they represented the system. And I felt like I hated them. And I felt like they did this because all these people are freaking hugging their brothers, and I'm looking at my brother on the screen. I'm a psychiatrist, and I walked out of there. Imagine if I was in a small cell by myself, left with those thoughts and that emotional response for 23 hours. I would come out a killer. And that's what we're doing to people. We're not rehabilitating people. In that moment, I had to use every psychiatric skill that I've been using for the last 10 years on other people. I was like, okay, cognitive behavioral therapy. I was like, okay, recognize the emotion, talk it down. Okay, bring it down. Those people didn't do anything to you. This is what I'm having to do for myself in the context of 20 minutes. 20 minutes waiting for my brother to come on screen. What about people who are in that box 23 hours a day for 20 years? Do we expect them to be able to do that? We can't expect them to be able to do that. And so this is just an anecdote, and then I'm going to go. So I'm sitting in there waiting for my brother to come. The other people, I started getting mad at the other people. Like, how can I be mad at them because they're having a visit with their loved ones? That's irrational, right? But that's the way the brain works. But so the woman, female correctional officer, stands up and she says, everyone, we've ordered pizza and it is being delivered, and if you want to eat lunch today, you'll need to end your visits in the next 5 minutes. How many people do you think left their visit? None. And what that was a real life display that prioritized nurturing over food, something we all know we can't live without. And I witnessed it in real time. Not one single one of those guys got up to leave their loved ones to eat. What they said is, being with my loved ones in a contact visit is more important than eating. And so, can we sit by and allow a system that refuses to provide the most basic of human needs for people who have been incarcerated? I would say the answer is no. And I would say by being here tonight, you also know that the answer is no. And I hope that we're all galvanized by the presentation that Dr. Rubin gave us tonight, that we don't have to stand by and we don't have to take it. We don't have to. We can stand up and we can say, even if they committed the most heinous of crimes, which, by the way, my brother didn't, for the record, but even if he did, even if he went to Carmel and he killed 3 kids, he is still a human. And we are not human if we don't treat him as such. So I hope after we leave tonight, we will all actually take this feeling and do something with it, because Dr. Rubin demonstrated for us that we can move the needle. And I would say that it is our responsibility to do so.
I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a daddy. And when your children, y'all can't hear me? When your children, is that better? Display the love that my daughter just displayed for my son, I'm a proud man. And the rage that she experienced, I've been holding it for a while. Because I'm not a psychiatrist. And when you go through a court, my son is accused of assaulting a guard, and you go through a court, and the court finds evidence that exonerates him and throws it out, so that the state cannot meet its burden. Yet the prison still puts him in solitary and won't even tell him when they're going to let him out of solitary, and actually try to tell us now that he's out of solitary. He's in the cell for 23 hours a day. He doesn't get out of the cell to go eat. He doesn't get a chance to have a contact visit. And yet and still you're going to tell me that he's in general population? A rose by any other name is still what? A rose. So we're saying that it's got to change. And there was a man this man, Reverend Byron Vaughn, he was supposed to be at this event today to speak. But this past Sunday, our God in heaven called him home. He dedicated his life to the least of these. We're dedicating this forum to him because he tried to make whole those who had been incarcerated and got out. He called himself a cultivator. But we're trying to cultivate a mindset, a people who is willing to stop the inhumanity to humans that's taking part in the prison system. Dr. Rubin has given me a document that depicts how to file a complaint. You'll get yours. Sister Alubinmi is a student here at the law school, and her expertise is international law. She's been working with us, and now we got the document. We got the roadmap. And we're looking for people who are saying enough. We cannot continue to let our government represent us in a dehumanizing way. Enough. Do I say that by myself? No. Is there anyone out here who will say enough?
Already had.
So can we become the organized few that will impact the unorganized many so that we can stop this inhumanity to man? If so, please give me a hand clap. After this event, I'll be available to give you information how to tie in so that we can start this movement to go to the United Nations to say, America, be what your founding father said that we're supposed to be. Can I get an amen?
Yes.
That'll work too. With that, I'm going to bring on Dr. Carlton. If you have questions, and I would ask the panelists if you would just come and sit there. And
thank you. So we'll have an opportunity now for questions and answers. We'll have our panelists have a seat. If you just press that green light comes on, press the button next to the mic, and that green light is on, you'll be able to go ahead and be heard when you speak. I'm just getting a mic so I can carry it out to the audience so we can hear questions that are raised. So with that, who has a question for, all right, so I see quite a few. We'll start off. If you could just tell us your names, and then if you would just tell us the question that you have.
Thank you so much for your very insightful talks. Your woundedness is really very healing for me. My question is to all of you, what barriers to the abolition of solitary confinement have you identified so far, and what are the appropriate solutions in order to demolish these barriers? Thank you first.
So what are the barriers to solitary confinement that you've identified, and what are the solutions to demolish them?
Is it on? Okay. Well, this is a great question. And I don't think there's, an uncomplicated answer. I think that one of the barriers is what I was referring to earlier as the appetite for punishment, that for some years in this country, the response by the public has been to intensify and to bring more and more behaviors into the criminal justice system that previously weren't. So I think that's one thing, or societal attitudes. Another thing is politically, fearing being soft on crime makes it very difficult for politicians to take positions in terms of any actions from their positions in the government. Numerous prison wardens, like the man in the clip from Maine, have stated that they would prefer to be able to begin to make a substantial change in solitary confinement, except they know they'll lose their jobs right away. I'm ordinarily a supporter of unions, but the unions that represent people who work in prisons do not want to lose their jobs. And so in the one of the impediments in the grassroots campaign that I mentioned earlier in Illinois, in the TAMS Supermax, one of the most difficult things to overcome was the union, and the union spreading all sorts of fears of what would happen if there were changes at TAMS. So those are a few thoughts that I have about it.
I agree with those thoughts. I think fear is very high on the list. The second is that we really have lost sight that individuals who are incarcerated are humans with the same human rights that we have. So we have to bring that back to bear. But the third is financial, and it's related to the union issue that he brought up, but also supermax facilities with the privatization of the prison system in the United States of America are very profitable for those companies. So general population generates less profit than solitary confinement does. And so there is certainly a financial driver that is undermining the willingness from that perspective to abolish solitary confinement.
I'm going to add something to what you're saying. I really like what you've said. Again, on this the movement regarding closing TAMS, one of the pivotal things that they were successful with is they got to the House Appropriations Committee in the state, and by presenting much of what we've talked about tonight, all the research that says this is not helpful, it's harmful, it's not accomplishing any of your goals, at a time of, and of course all the ways in which it violates the laws that we've talked about, the Appropriations Committee and then later the governor were persuaded, because at a time of fiscal tightening, wasting the amount of money they were wasting on this much more expensive form of confinement could no longer be supported, and that was the way they sort of got some action. So the action was not really to save humanity, as you say, it was to save money, but whatever works.
Yeah, we'll take it.
One more barrier in some small towns is the townsfolk. Town people, when persons proposed to close the prisons, have openly opposed it because of their concern about a lack of employment that they would then have. And so they argue that we need a prison here, even if we need to go out and find some prisoners to incarcerate just so we can have jobs. So changing the mindset that seeing prisoners as a mechanism to provide me with sustenance is a viable way to have a political mindset. This brother had his hand up.
Legal campaigns have United States submitted to from the UN. Well, I know it took over 40 years, and I don't even think they've signed it yet, the treaty against genocide. I think it may have come up, or it may be in debate now, but they never adhered to that. So what legal means, not political means, but what legal means does the UN have to actually challenge the United States government about solitary confinement?
Want me to do that? So, as we were talking about earlier, there's a question of whether governments ratify conventions, ratify laws. And as you're pointing out, that the relationship between the United States and the UN is, in many respects, a pretty troubled one. And the UN is, and the United States is not necessarily a party to many of the actions and institutions that make up the United Nations. For example, relative to what you're raising, as far as my knowledge, we are not a party to the International Criminal Court, that kind of thing. So that's one facet. Part of what I brought up, because I think that there is evidence that there has been some success in appealing to a different international body, that was why I was talking about the Organization of American States, because they took up the case. They took up the case in Chicago and commented on it in a way that seemed to bring about action. And so part of the documents that I've given Reverend Ajabu is regarding the Organization of American States. And also I have a resource list here of information, if anybody's interested, that will provide names and numbers and websites and so forth of resources that are relevant to the topic tonight.
Let's just follow up on that first. And to answer your question, legally, I want to say I'm not an expert in international law, but there isn't a legal authority that the United Nations has to force the United States to take any action. Right? The only kind of enforcement that you see on the United Nations, primarily against states in non-economic matters, is through the Security Council. And in the Security Council, we've seen it act when the United States has taken different kinds of military actions against different states. Right? And that's when it's acting to force compliance with certain edicts from the United Nations. Short of that, there is no legal authority that the United Nations has to require the United States to act in that sense, right? There is political authority, there's the ability to shame, there's the ability to encourage, there's the ability to cajole, but there isn't the ability to force the United States to act in a legal sense, as if we could appeal to a Supreme Court of the United Nations who could then order the United States to behave, and then the United States would have consequences if it did not.
Nothing. Nothing. My name is Neal Rubin. How about this, sister? We getting out of prison. You've been confined.
They said they can't hear.
We are getting out of prison. We've been confined. Solitary confinement, Indiana Department of Corrections, straight torture. No rehabilitation. Straight torture. So we getting out. They changing new laws, making it longer, making it harder. We are getting out, sister. So we got to deal with this. We getting out. We got mental illness. We got, confinement. I did like 3.5 years straight. 23 hours out of the cell and wrecked by yourself. Be by yourself. Now I'm in society. I think I'm kind of cool. But listen, we are getting out after serving 20, 15. I met brothers served 30 years. So what are we doing now for them brothers getting out? For them sisters getting out too? I mean, y'all can talk about all this and that. We got to deal with this, what's coming out.
I agree. So you're pointing to a really important practical issue, right? So to be cliche about it, if you don't use it, you lose it. That's true for every organ in your body, including your brain. And that houses your ability to interact socially, to manage your emotions the way I had to manage my emotions today, right? And so we confined you for 3.5 years with no social interaction, and like that man on the thing said, sure, we can have you spend your whole sentence in solitary, but don't live next to me when you get out, because your ability to interact in a healthy, productive way has a lot of times been irreversibly damaged. And so whilst the Indiana Department of Corrections mission and vision both includes rehabilitative language, I think my brother would agree with you. There's no rehabilitation. Quite the opposite. At least his experience and your experience and countless others that we could talk to. And so we do have to have reentry programs where we can bridge that divide to get people back to a healthy functioning, to prevent the chance that they go back to prison, and increase the chance that the psychological effects of their solitary confinement doesn't continue to haunt them, and as a result, the rest of society when they do get released. So I appreciate you bringing attention to that because it's critically important. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, sir.
I wasn't really going to address this issue, but I must address it since the brother over there raised the issue. I've been in solitary confinement. I did 16 years in the Indiana Department of Correction. And not only that, I emerged as a political prisoner. I studied criminal law, civil law, and international law in the belly of the beast in its solitary confinement. I came out of the cell, 23 hours in the cell, 1 hour a day. You know, I've been there, I done that. I know what it is. Studying it from a psychological standpoint of view, from a judicial standpoint of view, from a political standpoint of view, from an economical standpoint of view, and from the controlling family standpoint of view. This thing is set up, conniving from a controlling family. Even the United States government is privately owned, privatized. They done privatized the prisons and saying they want 90% full. When we talk about, I love what the brother said on the podium. I'm talking about your father. Enough is enough. If we ain't talking about getting out of the box and saying enough is enough, and then coming together up under a self-determination thing to change this corruption that done existed ever since this country was formed, then we are wasting each other's time. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
I would say you are in a unique position to move this needle because you represent humans that were in solitary confinement and luckily made it out with your psychological functioning intact. So I want to emphasize what you said because I can hear the anger in the way you talk, right? I'm a psychiatrist, so pardon me. I can hear your anger. You have to take that anger and send the message, not just in this room, but through your actions. Enough is enough. Using your inside knowledge of the system and galvanizing other people that have not had to experience that to say, look, do you see me as a human? I went through that, and this is the effect it had on me, and this is our collective responsibility to prevent it for someone else. So in many ways, having been in solitary confinement, you have even more power than the rest of us. So I challenge you to put it to use.
Thank you for mentioning meditation and martial arts.
brother.
Just for a short time, about the last year, I've been doing a very tiny volunteer program at the Indiana Women's Prison, teaching them meditation and emotional literacy. One of our women 3 weeks ago, who's been with me all this year, ended up in solitary. So she went into solitary for 15 days, and then she spends 90 days on what they call the grace unit at IWP, and they come out, they're out one hour a day. So I guess my question is, wouldn't it be interesting to do research with people that have had some background in meditation and then have been taken in, and also that have had the ability to study or show that there are some more positive aspects too, that there are, because what you have to do is get the side that's throwing them in and slamming the door and saying there are alternatives to this that are more humane, and if they have tools when they go in, they're likely to perhaps use these tools. So it'd be interesting. But thank you. I'm sorry.
That would be amazing. Go ahead.
Well, I would agree that the absence of any form of education, I mean, this could be called education, treatment, this could be called treatment, meaningful activities, this could be called meaningful activities, and so forth. These are all the things that we're saying that advocates are pushing for to try to do something about, the really barren existence that people are faced with, as we've heard described. So there are a number of different ways to approach the question here today. Some of it is to try to change things within the prison system, and some of it is to try to end this horror altogether.
All right, we had another question or comment here.
The first thing I want to do is give honor and respect to Reverend Bond. He's going to be missed. Thank you. My question is, excuse me, have you requested any mental evaluation or testing on your brother, if for nothing else, just to establish that there has been some mental or mental or deterioration, or even the fact that he's been able to resist and overcome the situations that they've faced him with every day on a daily basis? Has there anything been, you've requested it through the system for the family?
No.
Has he?
No, not that I know of.
Do you see any merit of wanting to do that?
It's a good question. So since in January, I think you said Supreme Court said that Indiana DOC was violating the 8th Amendment right of individuals with mental illness by housing them in solitary confinement, then you could take the track and say establishing mental illness might then provide an avenue for getting a person released from solitary confinement. So in that respect, I think, yes, it might work. Knowing my brother, he could probably beat the test. He's like, I hate to say unfortunately extremely smart, but he's unfortunately extremely smart. And for example, he's in a program because it doesn't really have any components, called the STAND program, that's supposed to rehabilitate. And there were psychological questions there, and he answered every one of them nonsensically, intentionally. And they returned it back to him, and the front of it said, "Good job."
What does that mean?
Right.
I'm sorry.
So I mean, there's not a good conduit, I think, but it could potentially be a strategy. Certainly, I would recommend for anybody that has documented history of mental illness that hopefully they would have an advocate that would be able to present that information, because they may be able to avoid solitary confinement. But I would like to see, like Dr. Rubin said, us not hold the civil rights, the human rights of one group above that of another, because we know that solitary confinement causes mental illness.
And with that being said, you, with all of your expertise as well as being attached to your brother in this situation, would you think more of it being a mental torture syndrome more than a mental illness? I would not like to think of that as a mental illness, because it almost is implying that it could have existed even prior to the treatment that he's receiving in the system, and there was nothing wrong with Kofi. So with that being said, it would, for me, is there anything on the books that would say that it's mental torture syndrome after post-traumatic, after the fact? Because that's really what happens, and I mean, we're witnessing it in this room from someone that has already said it. So is there anything on the books from the psychiatry world that they have done a study on people that are coming out of solitary confinement, and they're doing it right here in the United States, even right here maybe in Indiana, based on the information that they have, and they're just not releasing that information to us? Because I can tell you they're releasing them to our neighborhoods.
So, yes, there is data that shows that individuals, even if they didn't have documented mental illness prior to going into solitary confinement, can develop psychiatric symptoms, paranoia, depression, thoughts of suicide. So that is well documented, but I would be careful about drawing the distinction of mental illness that was there before they went in solitary confinement and mental illness that was caused by solitary confinement, because the point is that just by virtue of being human, solitary confinement puts you at risk for developing mental illness. And so when you draw the distinction, what happens is that they ban solitary confinement for people that had pre-existing mental illness.
Right.
Right? I really wanted to just be considered inhumane whether you have a pre-existing condition or not. Solitary confinement can cause mental illness.
And last,
yeah,
I hear you, brother.
Yeah.
So, last question. What is it that your brother tells you or leads by example in your life that has already, I hear you say how smart he is and that he can pass any test, but what is it that he tells you that this is my strength, this is what I'm planning to do, this is what I'm going to do? Because this is what humans do. We live from our past and we build for our future. So with all the information that you've sent in there to him to read, however, he has his family unit still. So what is it that he tells you as a brother has held him solid, and that don't worry, sister, I'll be there for you, and I'm going to hold my nieces and nephews and family and friends. Once again, what is it that he says to you that lets you know that that's really going to happen?
To answer your question, his strategies are meditation and martial arts. If it were not for meditation and martial arts, my brother could easily, we have a family of mental illness on both sides, right? So genetically, we are stacked and predisposed to develop symptoms of mental illness. Solitary confinement clearly is the type of social insult that can do that to you. So meditation and martial arts is what has kept my brother from being one of the bloody, smeary, feces smearing, urinating individuals, right? Meditation. And I mean, biologically, we know that meditation creates an environment in your brain that allows you to withstand torture that otherwise could not be withstood. And so That's why, yes, I have a budget to send him meditation books and martial arts books. But that's also why the Indiana DOC tried to take martial arts away from him. Like when I say there is a systematic pressure to dehumanize the individuals that are in prison, when they find what keeps you sane, they will arbitrarily find a way to take it. But meditation cannot be taken.
Let me say something along those lines. He was practicing martial arts at Pendleton. Nowhere in the system was martial arts against the law. They saw that he was doing it, and so the buttons made it against the law in Pendleton, and it was not against the law in any other facility within the country, within the state. And that was so that they were trying to break him, and they saw that when he was using that to be able to manage his mental health, and so they tried to take that away, took it away, and he still was able. And I love my daughter. My daughter is president of University of Pennsylvania, President Howard, ran circles around people at Emory. And we're not trying to go there for certain reasons right now. But my son is my sharpest child.
Oh man, thanks, Dad. No, it's okay. We all know it. He's the
I'm trying to tell you, this woman right here is top shelf. But that boy,
He's topper. He's a shelf above.
he's top shelf.
He's not.
So and we all know.
We all know.
We all know. But the whole problem is they done locked up a genius. Because he got messed around with some knuckleheads he didn't have no business being with. And now they don't want to let him out because they can't break him. We need to stop it.
We have one
And
last
he's not
question.
the only one.
That's-
He represents a lot of people in prison right now that could be changing the world for better.
We have, we've had this time well spent, and we've learned a lot, and we're very fortunate to have been able to have the benefit of you all's insights and wisdom. We're going to take one last question, and we're going to ask you all to give maybe some closing remarks, and then we'll bring our session to a close. Sir?
Yes. Reggie Jones, this has been very informative for me, and I also watch Ajabu's chest rise and the smile on his face as his daughter spoke. But as one who's not familiar with the laws and what's going on in terms of solitary, how can we come together to begin to do something? And what I see happens in most cases, we come to awareness like this, and it's very compelling to the heart to do something, but then it dies. So I'm trying to figure out, is there a law that can move this against the state of Indiana, a class action suit, or how do we raise the grassroots and others, lawyers, to support something that could be moved to do something?
Oh, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Thank you. I think that building a coalition is something to consider, to begin to reach out to other groups, get other groups involved. All different kinds of organizations. It can be very surprising who has a vested interest in some of the things that we've talked about tonight. I have an example, one idea, which I'm a little hesitant to mention. Dr. Harrison may want to prescribe some medications for me when I suggest this. But generally, when we think about advocating for prisoner reform, an institutional reform in the penal system. We're thinking about people who are progressive politically. But if you think about it, there are also people who are very interested in, for example, how institutions in this country limit freedom, personal freedom, how the government interferes and spends money thoughtlessly in ways that hurt individuals and so forth, this kind of thing. So you might be surprised to know that when I was talking about Dick Durbin's Senate committee that was looking into solitary confinement, he is a co-chair. And his co-chair had to approve everything that the committee did, including, the statements about banning solitary in certain ways. His co-chair is from Texas. For those of you who know, Senator Cruz of Texas is his co-chair. And it was Cruz who approved the gentleman, Mr. Graves, who I was quoting, who had been in solitary in Texas and finally exonerated after so many years. So reaching out, connecting, beginning to start a movement, you want to really cast a wide net and look for all sorts of opportunities, legal certainly, but all sorts of other community groups, because that's where a lot of the creativity comes from. The idea of having film, for example, artists being involved, not just politicians, people in the community of all backgrounds. And I would say don't underestimate the power that you have.
Did you have any closing remarks? Can we give our panelists a hand? We really appreciate everyone coming out. And Reggie, we are going to move forward formally. And you know Tanya as well as I know Tanya. We're going to get in touch with her, to see if she can't guide us in some way, shape, form, or fashion. We're going to study this. Kalanji, look for you to come and get on board, because we're going to study this. Brother, look for you to get on board. And I understand that, I understand that you're saying that there's got to be done for something for those who get out. I concur. And I say one of the things that we can stop it from inside so that you don't get out like that. So we're going to address all of that. But if you are interested in moving forward to stop inhumanity to man, then get with us after this event. Do not forget Reverend Vaughn. His services is Friday is the wake from 3 to 7. Saturday there will be an hour viewing from 11 to 12. The funeral is at 12, and all of that will be held at Crown Hill. May God keep you. May heaven continue to smile upon you. And as you are blessed, may you be a blessing. God bless you.